When we started the project in 2008, launched our first design challenge for the sites in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in 2010, it was an experiment. So we 100% ran it as an ideas competition because this wasn't out in the world. What were we asking for? We didn't know what would come in.
We all aspire to have public art in our cities. In terms of advancing our investment in our cities, if some portion of those can also be regenerative infrastructures, then all the better. We're tackling issues around spatial justice and creativity and also sustainable systems of survival at the same time.
Explain to us the mission of the Land Art Generator.
We're a nonprofit organization founded in 2008. What we do is combine renewable energy technology and other sustainable systems with public art and placemaking. So what would it look like if our energy landscapes were also places of wow and wonder and places that we really wanted to be in, rather than these places that are getting pushback, NIMBY pushback, that people don't want to live by for various reasons. Since 2010, we've been holding international design competitions for different cities around the world that invite interdisciplinary and collaborative teams to the table to do this, to reimagine what a power plant could be if it was both renewable and creative and culturally responsive.
Before change can occur, it must first be imagined. And before technology can be deployed at scale, it must be first radically accepted by society, by the public. And so through these visions into a beautiful post-carbon future, we're hoping to inspire the public to advance and advocate for a more rapid energy transition.
So climate's here to stay. I guess it's always been here to stay, but how is that affecting the way you guys think about your art?
Well, we're full steam ahead on what we started just over a decade ago. It really, what it does is it reiterates to us that we are on the right track with what we're doing and that we've created a practice for ourselves that feels super relevant right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like every human who cares about the future, we're serious about climate change, and we know we can tackle this problem, but we're not making very good progress yet. And a lot of that is cultural and political rather than technical. And so that's where art can sort of roll.
Sort of thinking about environmentalism, that's something that I've been thinking about a long time. But, the thing I see that you guys are always doing is the technology. You always have these things that are this very, very deep technological innovations. How do you start to think about what those even are?
When we started the Land Art Generator in 2008, one of our first tasks really was to do a thorough survey of the technology that existed at the time, and we've been tracking its progress ever since, putting out field guides to renewable energy technology, and we just updated it again last year. So
does that come from LEED, because you have a background in being LEED certified? Did you start getting those ideas when you were, where did the idea just like, how do you even do that? How do you keep up with what is a technological innovation that might eventually be made into something beautiful that could be in a design in a public space?
With regard to high performance building technology, that's definitely my background. In terms of energy landscapes, I think we've both done a lot of learning over the past decade and just trying to stay as on top of it, reading the literature as we can to know what's happening, what's new, staying on top of the news in different journals, and trying to convey that information to the creative community and the way that is easily interpretable.
And we're super fortunate that we get invited to various conferences and events that really keep us in the conversation so that we know what the latest technologies are and where they're coming out of around the world. Our spark was we were living in Dubai and really inspired by that place and the very aggressive initiatives. But also we came to understand that there were Emirati land artists. So inspired by everything in that landscape, we sat down and thought, what can the two of us, newly married, off on adventure, what can we do that helps to push that needle to get through these pinch points around the reasons we're not transitioning quickly enough? I have a master's in fine arts. Robert's an architect. We thought, this is what we can do. This is a marriage of our skills and talents and interests.
Now, had you just gone to Abu Dhabi, or had you been there before for a long time?
We moved there in 2008, having never been there. We moved in August, and it was in October that we sat down and brainstormed the land art generator. So it's an inspiring place, and it continues to be. We visit from time to time still, and work on projects there.
Was there something about that city being built out of being able to be changed and modified so quickly? Was there something there that inspired you specifically?
Yeah, I think in the first decade of the 21st century, the eyes of the world were on Dubai intensely, building the tallest building in the world, all the other incredible development. My interest was Masdar City, which was being developed in Abu Dhabi as the world's first carbon-free city of 40,000 inhabitants. And its ambitions have evolved over the time, but it was really an exciting time. And of course, it coincided a month after we moved to Dubai, the financial collapse hit the entire world. And so there was a lot of interesting cultural influences that brought us to the point of thinking about, we weren't using the term build back better then necessarily, but we saw an opportunity for the world to take a pause, a breath, and then think about how to build back regeneratively in a way that could make our cities more beautiful and sustainable at the same time.
When did you first go to Burning Man?
A couple years ago.
That recently? It seems like you guys have been going a long time.
Right. It might seem like that because we're all in now. We got this fabulous email from Dusty Michael in the winter of 2018 and asking how we choose our design sites. And Burning Man Project had recently purchased Fly Ranch. We didn't really understand who people were and what Fly Ranch was.
Mm-hmm.
We had no experience with Burning Man at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But then we headed off to Fly Ranch for an event in June of that year and really were wowed by that space. It's an incredible parcel.
But you went to the space before you went to Burning Man?
Correct. Yeah.
That's right.
So what about your first experience with Burning Man? Did you drive in or did you fly in? Like, how'd you get there? And did you get a bike when you got there? Like, what happened?
We packed our little Prius full of everything we could, and
there was hardly room for us.
And put our bicycles on the back, and we drove in. And we were very warmly welcomed into what's called the Outback, which is...
How long did it take you to get there? How long did it take the last couple of miles to get in?
Well, you know what? We went in early.
Yeah.
That's a great question. We went in early during the build week. So it wasn't so intense getting in. I remember it being a little bit slower getting out.
Yeah. Now, were you when you were in there during build week, you're in the middle of the desert, they're setting some stuff up, but do you have any idea what's coming?
Well, we had been following the event for years beforehand, as curious outsiders. But
were you in before the signs were up, or did you know where you were going?
The signs were up. We had the street layout was already there.
The street layout was there, but to full honesty, it was all new and wow, and what the heck is going on here? And it's hot and dusty.
First of all, what is Fly Ranch for those of us who may or may not know? And then what happens, so explain the context of why you're going in and now you're inextricably bound with Burning Man.
Fly Ranch is an aggregate of parcels that come to 3,800 acres north of Gerlach, Nevada, in a remote off-grid. There's no electricity, no services whatsoever. It's an old ranch. It has a rich history. It used to be a regional or a small airport at one time, which is why it acquired the name Fly Ranch. It's been used for ranching purposes, growing alfalfa, various other agricultural, and it's still used in that way today under Burning Man's ownership.
The thing about Fly Ranch is that, as opposed to Burning Man, is it's a permanent installation. Yeah. What are you guys trying to accomplish there?
So the design brief was a little bit different for Loggy 2020 Fly Ranch. In addition to asking teams to think through what renewable energy technologies might look like in creative form, we asked teams to think about shelter agriculture, composting, and waste management, water, and of course, energy. So what does it look like if all of these systems are creatively developed out on this off-grid place? So that was a huge difference in the design brief, and the results are amazing, outstanding, and we definitely encourage the listeners and viewers to check them out because they really show a path forward on this planet, not just for Burning Man Project and Fly Ranch, but for other developments around the world.
Surely we don't speak for Burning Man in any way. However, I can say that the organization has a renewed focus, and they put out a 2030 plan to become net zero as an event, and historically. So making it better for the world, for the planet, for nature, that Burning Man exists for it never to have existed. And that means offsetting the historical emissions of all of the events in the past and moving forward, becoming net zero. And Fly Ranch offers a really interesting part of that solution. Whereas Black Rock City is a temporary installation that comes up and comes down, Fly Ranch is there permanently. Because of permanence, offers the opportunity to create regenerative infrastructures that can help feed energy and resources and take waste and sustainably manage it in various ways. The site has a lot of water naturally on site, and for many, many years, they've been filling up the trucks to reduce the dust on the streets of Black Rock City from that, millions and millions of gallons. So it's always been a part of the ecosystem of Burning Man, and now it has an opportunity to be part of the solution for its sustainable goals.
Here we're seeing the intersection of a bunch of different things. Normally, when we think about environment, so much of it is bifurcating a small piece. People are saying, well, let's start on something small, but here you're saying, here's a whole ecosystem of things that interlock and work together. So what's the first meeting like creatively before there's ever a brief?
I really love that question. And for every design challenge that we hold, it's a little bit different that first meeting. But what's interesting about the Loggy 2020 Fly Ranch design brief, and something that I think created richer outcomes, was that one of our very first meetings was at Bruno's in Gerlach with local citizens of Gerlach. So maybe 30 folks showed up, and we had pizza and a conversation about what would they like to see in the design brief. Mm-hmm. And some of those nuggets, all of their nuggets made it in. They had to, because they are the folks that will be living near these installations.
We also sat on council meetings with the Pyramid Lake Paiute and the Lovelock Paiute tribes, explaining what the project was and getting feedback, and that participation carried through the jury as well. So part of our whole ambition with the Land Art Generator is to give the public the tools necessary to co-design our energy future together, or our regenerative future together. So in crafting the design brief, it is a process of feedback, information, distillation, and then we try and write a brief that asks teams to generate ideas that are the reflection of those comments and thoughts, all within the context of providing beautiful systems for human survival that are in harmony with nature.
Now, to me, that goes back to my first question, which is you were asking people locally who have longevity, presumably, in a place, and you're asking them what is important to them. Were there 2 or 3 things that you can remember from that first meeting of what would be, prioritization of what was most important for them?
Yeah, one that comes to my mind is the term authenticity of place, that whatever the submissions were and the ideas generated by these interdisciplinary teams around the world, that they had to have an authenticity of place, that place right there in Gerlach.
And that they should seek to include the community, Gerlach and the surrounding communities, in the ongoing operations of these permanent infrastructures, and certainly in their construction and their planning. These are only concept designs that come into these competitions, so they require detailed development. We're excited that it's already happening, that folks are being brought in to help in the prototyping stage.
And then, of course, there was the conversation about how could these potentially benefit the economy of the area.
In Abu Dhabi, it strikes me that leadership is super top down. Did you develop this same sense of how to interact with community in Abu Dhabi? Is it sort of like you have tribes in Abu Dhabi who you included in the conversation, and then here you took the same methodology to have locals involved?
Well, we've run design challenges twice now in the United Arab Emirates, and both had a different set of local stakeholders, including university students. We've worked with Zayed University students and faculty, as well as American University in Dubai students and faculty, to get their feedback and input. And also,
both of those are very inspiring students, yeah?
Absolutely. And Zayed University was super interesting because they're all Emirati students. So American University in Dubai is a wide range of students from around the Middle East, but Zayed University, Emirati women specifically, is who we were working with. And so really an amazing dynamic group of young women providing feedback.
And a lot of outreach in every place that we work has to do with public exhibitions, workshops, panel discussions, and that's really no different. Those tools are fairly universal. You want to be able to communicate for some of the design principles with the local community, but what about the aspirational things that you're trying to get into the design brief? Is there another set of stakeholders that aren't represented locally? Yeah, I think it's tying the global with the local, and the aspirational elements that you're talking about really come down to the conversation globally about what a post-carbon future looks like. And Fly Ranch offered this opportunity. We hate to use the word blank slate because there's a rich ecosystem that exists there and a history at the site. But in a way, without any services, no electricity, it offers an opportunity to think about if you were somehow given a planet Earth in its pre-industrial, pristine wonder, and you wanted to create the vibrant, thriving global economy and standard of living that we enjoy, how would you do that starting from scratch in a way that is not extractive and harmful of the ecosystems within which you're working? And so that's the really big picture aspiration, is we were looking for solutions that worked in concert with natural systems, using materials that had low footprints, learning from indigenous methods and low carbon communities to identify ways to approach infrastructure in the 21st century, and also the idea of land art in the 21st century. Of course, that's a big inspiration. You can tell from the name of our organization that we see an opportunity in creating ambitious works of creative sculpture in beautiful landscapes that create transformational human experiences. When we talk about a design challenge here, you're talking about these interlocking different, projects. Do you also have to think about the financial model that makes them sustainable? Like, what does sustainable mean in this context?
When we started the project in 2008, launched our first design challenge for the sites in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in 2010, it was an experiment. So we 100% ran it as an ideas competition because this wasn't out in the world. What were we asking for? We didn't know what would come in. So there was no way we could make any sort of promise of construction or, it was an experiment that was successful. Couldn't believe it. All these submissions came in, people responded. They were fabulous. They were even greater than we could have imagined. So in the early years, it had to be held in that way. It's an ideas competition. We're just getting people used to this idea. What could this be? So it's only in the recent design challenges where we've started considering immediate development, like a Fly Ranch for Loggy 2020. So we've started that process with prototyping. Because these are infrastructural, they are sustainably generating clean drinking water, useful kilowatt hours of electricity for the demands of the site and the uses that occur there. And they do so using resources that are naturally free, like sunlight. They do have a return on their own investment. And because they're using low footprint materials and local materials, they often have a low capital cost as well. So that's if you want to look at the financial side of the ledger, thinking in terms of cities, we all aspire to have public art in our cities already. In terms of advancing our investment in our cities, if some portion of those can also be regenerative infrastructures, then all the better. We're tackling
issues around spatial justice and creativity, and also sustainable systems of survival at the same time. And that has economies that goes
A
along.
project that we love to use in a conversation like this is not a land art generator, but it's all free license waterfalls, New York City waterfalls, that was up for 4 months.
It was wonderful. That was a wonderful project where we saw, waterfalls underneath bridges and just being in the middle of nowhere. It's quite spectacular.
It was spectacular. And it was a $15.5 million project for 4 months, but it brought in $53 million in incremental spending.
Mhm.
So it's a really well-studied example. And we love that example because we think, gosh, what if an artwork had that level of dynamic engagement from the public and tourism and everything that comes with that?
Fire Inch's aspiration is to be a visitor center and all sorts of things there, yeah?
It's a year-round place for the kinds of radical experiments and living that Burning Man is so great at.
And right now they are really trying to figure out what it will be used for. So it's early stages, but they have this portfolio now of approaches for developing.
When you get submissions on that, you might get a great submission that is environmentally friendly, like maybe it's wind or it's solar, but it's not beautiful. So do you have to pair contestants up with other contestants? Do you in the middle of the process, do you say, why don't you go back and because maybe a team maybe it has one part that's great and it doesn't have another part that's great. Like, how do you deal with that within a competition?
Well, we don't know what the design is until the competition is closed and the submissions come in, usually just an hour before the deadline. But what's great is that throughout the open design challenge process, we do get emails from, say, an engineer that really wants to pair up with an architect or a landscape architect or an artist. So we do get to do some matchmaking along the way and create these sort of openings.
As an architect who's entered design competitions before, has always been, both of us are very focused on making this an incredibly fair process. And so we are not a part of the jury, and we don't influence the jury, and we don't provide feedback to teams throughout the design process.
Synonymous. Every step of the way, and we oversee that to make sure that it isn't a popularity contest. We really want good ideas to rise to the top, and those can come from anywhere around the world.
What is a competition like to really redo or revitalize, an urban area? What is that process like, and any experience with that, and take us through a scenario of that?
Yeah, I'll start by talking about the different site typologies we've been engaged in with our design challenges. So LOGI 2010, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, we consider urban gateways. We chose 3 sites that were these places that you had to drive through to get to a city center. LOGI 2012, New York City, was at Fresh Kills Park. So that was a former landfill. Then we shifted to a brownfield site in Copenhagen for 2014, across from the Little Mermaid. 2016 was a coastal site, Santa Monica, right off from the pier.
Geez, you guys have a pretty good
travel. I'm
track
Santa
record.
Monica.
You know what I mean?
I'm Santa Monica, so we want to go back to, I live in.
Well, then 2018 is really interesting because 2018 was in Melbourne, Australia, for a site that had already had multiple master planning processes that are very complex and controversial. And so we came in to have an overlay on the final master plan that was community approved. The first master plan was not community approved, nor was community a part of the process. So that was, it's a very delicate, sensitive cultural site in St. Kilda Triangle.
And then before we get back to Santa Monica, and I definitely want to do that, we are in the process right now of developing LOGI 2022 Mannheim. And that's going to be very interesting because it's really going to talk about how do we weave energy creatively into the fabric of the city in ways that are modular and scalable, and at the scale of civic infrastructures down to the scale of a private garden. So
does the pandemic enter into it? So when people are thinking about how they interact, or space, or we won't know, I guess, because you haven't done it yet.
We won't know. We're right now in early stages of putting together that design brief. So we could be in a position to guide some of that conversation of what you're asking. This is the time that we are developing that.
Well, thank you guys for coming on and talking to us about these things. It's been wonderful to learn a bit about what you guys are doing.
Can we send people to your website, right?
landartgenerator.org. It's got so many layers of information and links out to learn more about Fly Ranch and the Burning Man project, etc.
Free educational materials in PDF format to download and lots of content.
Well, thank you guys for doing that work. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
On behalf of the world, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for this work. It's fantastic.
Thanks, Priscilla.
My gosh, thank you so much, both.